Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello and welcome to the Speaking of Cults podcast. This is Chris Shelton, your host. Thank you very much for joining me again this week. Hey, everybody. As you can see, this week we are doing something kind of cool. I've got a guest here in studio. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see that. This is Melanie Trecek-King, and she has been on the show before. She's awesome. She is a science educator, critical thinking educator, and author, and somebody who goes around and does public speaking on these things. And in fact, was here in Denver speaking at the Secular Hub this weekend. And so we thought we would do a podcast as well. Melanie, welcome to the show.
It's so great to be here again and to meet you in person.
Thank you. Yes, lots of fun. I really am. I'm floored to meet you, and I am so happy that you are here in Denver and we got a chance to do this. As you all know, critical thinking is kind of important to me. It has been something that I've talked about from coming out of a cult very early on. It was one of the very first things that saved my life, my sanity, and basically put me on the road to rational thinking. And while there's an awful lot of people, I am sure, who are more than happy to call me out on irrational things I've done over the last 10 years, including me, I will say that without that guidance and path of Carl Sagan, James Randi, Michael Shermer, Skeptic.com, critical thinking, there's no way I'd be talking to you right now in the position that I'm in with the education that I have and be able to share and help people the way that I do. And I owe it all to learning about critical thinking. So it's a really important topic to me. It's also an important topic to you. Do you want to tell everybody why?
I'm a science educator, and my background actually is, so I'm a plant ecologist, and I specialize in teaching science to people who don't want to be scientists when they grow up.
So they kind of come in like, what's this science crap? Do I even need to know anything about it?
It's mostly like, oh my God, I hated science in high school, and I just got to get through this class and get the grades so that I can move on to the things that I want to do.
Right.
And as a scientist, look, as a biologist, biology is the study of life. It literally helps us understand us and our place in this world. And I thought I had an easy product to sell. With as much as I love biology, I realized that most of my students were just going to memorize what I was teaching them and regurgitate it on an exam and then leave not only not remembering those things, but probably hating science as much as when they got to me. And that broke my heart a lot, because science isn't just what we know, it's how we know. And that was the difference for me. I know Carl Sagan. I've been following Carl Sagan for as long as I have been interested in science. But I didn't put that together with what I was trying to teach until I had this crisis moment where I thought, I need to serve my students better than this. And I stumbled upon a Carl Sagan quote, which is that if we teach people, I'm going to paraphrase, if we teach people the findings of science, no matter how interesting and inspiring those findings may be, without teaching them the process, how can the average person possibly distinguish science from pseudoscience?
Right. Or magic.
Right.
Exactly.
And so I wanted students to understand, I was teaching this pre-pandemic, right? And at this point, is what I taught my students in intro bio, was that even useful to them? We had a new virus, we had a new vaccine, we had so much that changed. And that's what science is good for, is okay, we've got something we want to understand, let's explore it. And we teach science knowledge in science classes like it's static. Here is what we know. Here's all the facts and evidence and so on. And so when science changes, it doesn't mean it lied, right? It means that we learned something new, and that is awesome. And especially if we have something new to explore. So I I'm rambling now. I don't know if I answered your question, but I came at this as a science educator, just trying to serve my students better, which is how I stumbled upon teaching just critical thinking and skepticism.
Excellent. Well, I don't think you were rambling, but I definitely get where you were going. I'm going to say that, I throw out things like magic and people might scoff or laugh or whatever. But if you think about the spells and incantations that people sort of cast these days through horoscopes, through, prayer, through various rituals and, meditations and various things. These are, people do an awful lot of kind of silly and strange things these days in our modern world, trying to compensate for, cope, or deal with the fact that they just don't control things in their life. And I think that the difference between what critical thinking is doing and what those things are doing is exactly what Sagan says. It's the process. You're actually learning something about how this world works and how we work. And it's kind of the whole give a man a fish versus teach the man to fish thing, right?
Yes.
It's kind of that.
It's exactly that.
It's exactly that. Yeah. So I think that this is more than, something that is a public service or something. I literally think of critical thinking at this point as a survival skill. If you don't have it, you just ain't surviving at the level that you really could be.
Yes.
That's how,
Yeah, I feel like I'm just going to drop a bunch of quotes now because other people say things way better than I can.
I totally understand that.
But Schick and Vaughn have this wonderful book called How to Think About Weird Things. And they say that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your decisions. And the quality of your decisions is determined by the quality of your thinking.
Those are very good points.
Now, obviously, there are things outside of our control.
Yep.
But there are things that are within our control. And
lots of them.
Because of that, we need to, if we want real empowerment, it is understanding how to think better, how to find information better so that we can make wiser decisions.
Big time. Exactly. Because one of the things about not having the process or understanding of how to figure things out or how to navigate when misinformation is being given to you or disinformation or bad, instructions, right, or whatever, is it helps you make those decisions. Like you think I don't know how to put this exactly. Like you think your decision making is this static thing, but when you learn more and get more, then your decision making improves. Because I can't agree with that quote enough. I made one bad decision when I was 15 years old that affected my entire life. One bad decision wiped out 27 years of my life. So when I hear quotes like that, I go, yeah, I can connect to that. I wish I'd had better decision-making skills in that moment. And there's a lot to this. It's not just, oh, I can spot some logical fallacies. I'm amazing, right? There's so much more to it. And what I wanted to maybe talk about today, because based on your talk that you gave at the Hub, if you guys get a chance to go see Melanie give speaking, by the way, or give a talk, you all need to go check that out. But you also are connecting the same dots I've been connecting for years. And I think I don't know, I wanted to ask you about this, because you're kind of your foot is more planted in the skeptic world than mine is. In that you go to the talks and the cons and you give, and you interact with folks in that world. But you connected it to emotions. And I think that's important because when I first started studying critical thinking, it was all about logic and spocking it and, and being rational and navigating things through these logical fallacies, but very little acknowledgement of emotion.
Yes. Actually, I have an upcoming article in Skeptical Inquirer about critical thinking. So I'm going to tangent and come back.
Yeah, let's do that.
So I have a good friend, Bertha Vasquez, who is the education director for the Center for Inquiry and a 30 plus year educator in the middle school science classroom. And after having this epiphany and deciding that I loved biology, but I needed to move on, I created a class in its place that teaches critical thinking, information literacy, and science literacy. And I wrote an article, published it in Skeptical Inquirer, and it was called Teach Skills, Not Facts. And the idea is that, again, the process is more important than the findings. Mm-hmm. So over the years, Bertha, who I respect very much, and she's a wonderful person, we kind of had this little conflict over this issue because she would say, well, Melanie, we do teach critical thinking. The next generation science standards require us to teach critical thinking. And the irony is that step one of critical thinking is defining our terms. And we realized years later that we were talking over each other because we had different definitions of what critical thinking was.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to bring that up.
So most science classrooms, for example, in the next generation science standards, what they define critical thinking as, and they don't generally explicitly define it, but what they mean is problem solving. As in, here is information around a topic, think through it to understand it better, to potentially solve a problem. And all of that is a really useful skill, but it does require in-depth knowledge in a field. Now, I was teaching intro bio, and I was actually doing that. For example, when I taught mitosis, which is cellular reproduction, I didn't just teach the stages of mitosis. I used cancer as a tool to help students understand. Cancer is unregulated cell growth. So I would help my students understand or ask them to think through the process of cancer and where in the cell cycle did the errors happen that led to unregulated cell growth. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that it requires deep knowledge within a field to do that.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain cells losing control of... Did they lose the condom? I don't know. What happened? Right?
Well, and there's the other thing, like in a classroom, what would happen is I would give you useful information, legitimate, like the best knowledge that we have around this topic for you then to be able to think through that problem. The real world doesn't have those guardrails, right? So if I wanted to understand a topic, I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to start search something, and I'm going to lead Google to wherever my biases and emotions and so on sent me. And then I'm again going to use all of that to think through it. And I'm probably, because, I was taught that I could critically think through these things myself, that of course, that I was capable of doing all of that. So what they mean, what that definition means, is problem solving. What I meant was better thinking.
Right.
And I got that through Sagan and through the Stephen Novella and The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, and Richard Feynman and Timothy Caulfield and so many wonderful, Guy Harrison. There's so many great authors in the skeptic community that when they talked about critical thinking, what they meant was better thinking. And so when I teach my students critical thinking, it's step one, what is it that you believe? And why do you believe it? And do you have good evidence for that belief? Is it a falsifiable belief or is it not? Is it something that that I want to believe? So maybe are my emotions or my desires driving this reasoning? About why isn't I know what I saw or I felt better, so I know it works. Why isn't that sufficient evidence? And so the limits of our perception and memory. What are the cognitive biases that can lead our thinking astray? Confirmation bias, motivated reasoning, the availability heuristic, and all of that then in my head, if I'm not aware of what my brain wants to do on its own on autopilot, I could just fool myself and then get to a place where I'm really confident that I believe is true because I'm a critical thinker and I used evidence. And so I'm right.
That's right. Even though maybe not. Right. And this is the thing, is there's no one process that always guarantees you an end result of truth, because it involves your active participation as the critical thinker. And so you can't substitute process. There's a point where you have to accept that this is something you're going to have to go about doing. I guess in the same way that I'm always going back to martial arts with my analogies with critical thinking, because I think of it as a discipline and a skill that you learn and are constantly improving. There's no peak. With martial arts. There's no peak. You could always be better. Somebody else could always come along and beat you, right? That you always have to think that way. And so as a critical thinker, I believe the same thing. You have to constantly refine and work your muscles doing this. And so it becomes a discipline, not just a quote unquote skill, right? That's how I think about it.
Oh, I agree.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, actually. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions about critical thinking is that if you're smart or educated, you're a critical thinker.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And it is not true. Like, we have to learn how to think critically.
Yeah.
And we have to practice it, and we have to turn it on. Like, even knowing how to do it is not sufficient, because if we're not aware, then we're just going to use those skills that we've taught our brain to justify the conclusions that we already wanted to believe.
Exactly, because that's how we naturally think anyway. One of the things I wanted to clarify today in talking about this, and we've been talking about it off mic, is the fact that there is another component to human thinking that critical thinking classically has not entered into the equation, and that is emotion. Emotion is something that we have only really, in the last couple decades, really started studying scientifically from the psychological point of view with neuroscience, which has been opening up all kinds of interesting and intriguing windows into, oh, that's what happens there. And, oh, when I'm happy, this part of the brain's activated. And when I'm sad, this part. And, oh, look at the multitasking that's going on where this part of the brain is involved in this emotion, but also this other one. And all these various things that have been coming out of this. Unfortunately, that means we have to, I think, from my point of view, if we're going to be better thinkers, and I want us all to be better thinkers, then we have to understand that a big, huge 90% of our thinking is emotional processing.
Yeah.
How does that enter into all this?
There's so much there. I'm going to do my best to not ramble. So if you want to cut me off at some point, please do.
Okay. Tell me what you got.
Well, the first thing is you said something about how wanting to do it, wanting to think critically about something. And that's actually a really important ingredient, because knowing how to think critically is not sufficient. You have to want to do it. And it takes effort, and you have to turn it on, and you have to be really critical of your own beliefs. That's the point. And so when I teach this with my students for the motivation aspect, I use the what's the harm question. Like, what could happen? What's the worst that could happen if I don't think critically about this issue? And sometimes it's you voted for the wrong candidate, or a candidate that doesn't align with your beliefs, or maybe it's money. Like, I'm too cheap to waste my money, so spending money on an alternative therapy that isn't evidence-based is money I could spend elsewhere. But also there could be bodily harm. There's actually a website called What's the Harm? And it's by various modalities of alternative healing therapies. People who have gotten very sick and are paralyzed, or they are dead, or they killed their children.
Wow.
It is there can be serious harm to not thinking critically.
Well, that's always the struggle of thinking through, as I try to put it with people, is thinking through not only the intended consequences, but all of the unintended consequences. And if there is one thing we suck at, it's numbers. And it's thinking about unintended consequences, right?
Well, it's a lot of thinking. Yes. And again, that's hard work.
A lot. It is hard work, right?
I'm just going to avoid it if I can.
Yeah.
But the emotional part of the brain, I suppose what I'm trying to do is harness the emotional part of the brain to go, well, actually, hold our horses here. What could happen? But so to the emotional part of the brain, though, there's a lot of people who think, I hear it often, let me say, as somebody who communicates science online, from people who think they're Spocks or creatures of pure rationality.
Yeah.
And not being aware of your emotions is not the same thing as your emotions not impacting your reasoning. And so with our reasoning, the vast majority of it happens without our awareness. It happens at an unconscious level. It is an automatic process that involves the assumptions that our brain makes based on what it already knows, air quotes, about how the world works, about its biases, those are those cognitive biases, about its emotions, its identity needs, its tribal identity needs. And all of those, again, this is the part about this part of the brain. We don't have to think about it. It just uses that, it jumps to a conclusion, and often what happens then is we use our critical thinking skills to justify that conclusion as opposed to actually thinking through that conclusion.
Right. And this goes back to that analogy Haidt offered of the rider and the elephant. You talked about this in your book. Obviously, you've read Haidt.
Yep.
And he goes into a whole theory of moral foundations, which I agree with as a theory. I think he demonstrates an interesting bias in his own book about his theory, which I found fascinating. Science is wonderful because it's done by humans. And so bias is there no matter what, even from the guys who come up with their own theories. Because I thought it was quite fascinating because he makes claims about conservatives versus liberals that I found objectionable, right, in his book on moral foundations, because he offers the idea that the conservative bent is more variety of moral variety to it, I guess, under the way his theory works than your more liberal progressive mind. And I don't agree with that concept. Within the framework of his own theory, I don't agree with that. But I still love his theory. Anyway, I'm just rambling right now about my opinions on Haidt because I never get to talk about this. But the rider and elephant thing is very, very useful as an analogy, I believe, for what we're talking about. Because all of this is just modeling. I mean, the brain is just this big mass of stuff that does what it does. We're trying to understand its processes so we come up with these analogies, but it's not like the brain really... Anyway, you guys get the idea. So there's a rider and an elephant. What is this? What is this?
Oh gosh, there's so much there. And actually, I will say, I have not told you this previously. When I was an undergrad, I took an anatomy class where we had a cadaver lab.
You got to cut up a cadaver?
A couple of them. And I have lots of stories on that. But the one that's pertinent to this is, it is a really humbling process. It's a humbling experience to see the brain for what it is. And to think about the person who is alive and that brain inside their head held the thoughts that they thought of as them.
That must have been... Because I've never held a brain. I've seen a cross-sectional slice in my 10th grade science class. That's as much brain as I've had.
And as a biologist to have dissected a lot of animals, cats and pigs and dogs, and I'm talking about the so-called higher vertebrates here, but we all have that same basic gray matter, the same basic brain structures, and in many respects, we are no different from those animals. We are capable of higher order thinking, especially if we get out of our own way. I got really deep there for a second. I apologize for that. But
it's okay. We like deep thoughts here.
Okay, deep thoughts.
Deep thoughts.
By Melanie here.
That's right. Instead of Jack. No Jack Candy, though. Yeah.
So, Jonathan Haidt's elephant and the rider analogy, it's very similar to Daniel Kahneman's System 1, System 2. I find that students relate to elephants and riders better than they do systems.
I do too. I have struggled to remember System 1, System 2. I've never struggled to remember rider and elephant. It works as an analogy.
They're like characters in the brain that, you know what, I got it. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, so the idea is that you have an elephant and a rider on top of the elephant in your brain. And the elephant is big and it's powerful and it's always on. You don't have to think about the elephant. It's the part of the brain that's on autopilot. It's constantly doing its thing in the background. The rider sits on top of the elephant, and the rider is capable of critical thinking. It's the part of the brain that you think of as you. It's the, I can critically think through things, right? But it sits on top of that elephant, and that elephant is big and powerful. The elephant is motivated by its biases and its emotions and its identities. And it uses its model of how it knows how the world works to come to a conclusion. When I say come to a conclusion, to jump to a conclusion. Something new has happened. I need to make a decision. This is happening without our awareness.
That's right.
It uses those motivations based on what it knows. It jumps to a conclusion. Now, the writer, we assume the writer went, here's evidence. What do I want to believe? I don't know. Let me evaluate this evidence and come to a rational conclusion. The writer just uses what the elephant suggested to it and says, yeah, that sounds about right. And then if asked, well, here are all of the reasons why that's right. And the really frustrating part about this is that we like to think that education and intelligence makes us immune to that kind of thing. But actually, there are a lot of studies that suggest the opposite, that the smarter we are, the better our the better our rider is at finding justifications for what the elephant already believed.
Right. It's that old confirmation bias, motivated reasoning thing. And that's kind of what we call that.
Yeah, and especially if the elephant is really motivated, like if it's really an emotional issue, it's an identity issue. It's something I've staked my reputation on. I've put out there publicly that I believe this, and it's really an emotional process for me. Then yeah, my writer is really motivated to find reasons for why that's true.
That's right. And in case y'all have heard that quote. It's been assigned, I think, incorrectly to Voltaire and other people, but it's the one about, or some famous people, but it's the one about how if your income relies upon having a certain opinion, right, then it's going to be awful hard to get you off that opinion. Right, that's kind of what the elephant's thinking with your income, right? And the rider's going, oh, no. I have lots of highfalutin reasons to believe these things are true. And let me go on CNN and explain them all to you, in some group chat. That's what we're bombarded with this all day, every day. This is not some minutia weird thing that happens in the deep bowels of libraries or academia or something. We're all doing what this process you're describing here constantly, all day long, every time we're justifying any decision to ourselves or our significant others.
I really like deep bowels of academia. Yeah. And also, yes, when we've got a personal fight with our spouse, like, oh yeah, I have reasons.
Exactly. And we will invest in those reasons, and we will see those reasons that we come up with or have figured out as the most important, as the most valuable, as the senior ones. And there we go into, the argument cycle and all of that. When in fact, now here's the tricky part, and the part that just messes with your head forever, is you don't actually know at the rider level. You don't really know why your brain served up that answer. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to go buy you a candy bar right now. Which one should I buy you?
I like Snickers.
Okay, Snickers it is, right? That's the answer that comes up the line. Now, if I start interrogating why, maybe I get the right answer and maybe I don't. All you know is I asked you a question and boom, there's the answer. It's completely subjective. There is no right answer there. So who knows what 50 or 100 different elements your lower brain processes are going through to go, Snickers. Maybe it's, maybe you got a craving for peanuts right now, or maybe there's something about that caramel or something.
Can I change my answer? And now I have a craving for an ice cream Snickers bar.
Okay, there we go, right? So it's just fascinating because we do know from research and brain science, I'm telling you, we can go into, hours of this, well, we can't because we're not neuroscientists, but it can be gotten into, like, the hours of like deep work on this that shows you can literally stick somebody in an MRI or these brain scan machines or hook things up to them and watch the decision-making process happen in real time. And then watch the person come up with all the reasons why. The decision was made before any of those reasons are popping up for the person. That's what's so fascinating.
Yeah. And really scary.
Yeah.
And I will, again, I run into this a lot with my science communication. It can seem really bleak when you realize just how irrational our brains can be. And then next thing you know, you're descending into this like, oh my God, what is true? I don't know what's true. How can I believe anything? How do we know anything? The reason that science has been so successful is in that science has helped us understand the world in a meaningful way that's useful to us, to help us create things that help us better live our lives. The reason science is sort of secret sauce, I call it, is that it's not practiced by individuals. The check on how to check an individual's reasoning is with others. Individual's reasoning.
Bingo.
I have biases and emotions, and so do you.
That's right.
And so if we want to figure out how to solve a problem, we have different perspectives on this. Could I be right? I'm going to say my best chance at this is, I don't know. Here's what I think, and here's why I think it. But actually, what do you think, and why do you think that? Let's focus on how to work together, how to collaborate to solve this problem.
That's it. And that's the process. That's actually the process that we know through evolution works. But we fight that process because this thing called ego. And that's our bugbear. And that's for my modeling, the way I think about this stuff. That's the thing that sits that's the little evil elf in the middle of this whole little thing of this, this is the ghost in the machine, right? Is this like mood? What mood are you in? Now, you watching this or listening to this right now know, if you have an honest bone in your body, and I think you all do, that when we're in different moods, we have different reactions to things and we think about things differently, and therefore we come to different conclusions. What's different? Not the facts. The facts aren't different. We are. Our moods change. We're happy one moment, we're sad another. We get affected by things around us. Most emotions are reactions to external stuff. So if we know this is true, then why is it that when we're in a bad mood, we can be so sure we're making the right decision, right? Like what about this stuff? What do you find in your research on this?
So part of it is my my personal experiences and what other experts have helped me understand. I will speak for myself. Knowing what your elephant is up to is the most important first step.
Yep.
Being aware that potentially what's happening now, how I'm perceiving the situation, the thoughts that I'm having about it, what I think potentially others' motivations are, what are they saying? All of that could just be impacted by my current emotional state.
Yep.
So once I know that, now I need to be aware of what my writer might be doing. And this is, I think, the power of this this analogy. And if I put it now with the two of us, so if I know what my writer, if I know what my elephant is up to, and I'm trying to have a conversation with you, I need to know what your elephant is doing. Because again, you think that it's your writer that's in charge. And that's probably not true. Maybe it is. I don't know. You might have more control of your elephant than I do. So now I can try to talk to your elephant, try to think about what might be motivating your reasoning. For me, though, also that awareness, I know that there are times that my writer is not as strong as I would like it to be. So even if I know what my elephant is up to, sometimes the writer's like, screw it, I don't even care, right? And, you know, for example, at the end of the day, my writer is more like I don't even care. Give in, somebody comes at me online with a comment. And instead of reflecting and thinking about what's the most productive way of handling this, what might be motivating their comment, how can I do this in a way that is not only productive for the two of us, but maybe the others watching? At the end of the day, my writer's like, I don't even care. Screw it. Gloves off, going in, because I'm giving in to my elephant, right?
That's right. You just jump off. Let the elephant take over. Have at it, buddy.
Next thing you know, my elephant is rampaging, and the next day I don't feel so good about it.
Exactly. It's like you wake up from a drunken hangover and you look at where the elephant's and he's just like this path of destruction in the middle of your life. And you're like, I didn't think he was going to go that far, and there it is. Yeah.
No, he totally
I've
did.
never had that happen to me. Never done that. Never.
Yeah. So the best thing I could do at that point is probably just, often what I do is I talk to my husband, and he knows this is going on, and I'll tell him what's happening, and he'll say, why don't you wait till the morning and see what happens? See how you feel then.
Exactly. As I want to say, give yourself some time, because I guarantee you, however you feel about it right now and the angst of it, you give yourself a day, you give yourself 2 days if you need it, if you're really angsty, you will feel different.
Yeah.
You will. Because not one human being who is sane, at least, and I think most of the people watching my show are sane, are stuck or fixed in an emotional state or mood. It changes constantly. That's human nature. So we can count on certain things, and that's one of them. And it's really important to remember that, because even us trained, knowledgeable educators in science and critical thinking can be overwhelmed by our emotions and moments, and by our moods, and by these things. And it sucks. But it's just being human. It's the struggle.
Yeah. And sometimes it really sucks to be the adult and to back up from that for a little bit.
Yeah.
But if I think it can, in the moment, feel really good to lash out at other people.
Oh, yeah. Justice, baby. Get even.
Totally.
Right? Tit for tat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we may feel completely justified in those reactions. And it can feel even like bravery, even like courage to go after and fight these things. But the real empowerment and the real courage is in reflecting.
That's right.
Being aware of what your brain is doing, being in control of what your brain is doing, and your reactions. Now, you can't control other people, but you can control yourself. So I can't control what that commenter said to me, but I can control my response. And is my response going to be a rampaging elephant? Or is it going to be a more thoughtful approach? And it is much harder to do that. And it takes so much more courage to approach it that way than it does to just feel good in the moment and let it rip.
That's right. That's right. It's a mix of things, I think, in terms of the emotional makeup of that, because there's a lot going on. The more powerful it feels, the more you can be sure that there's a lot going on. You have anger, you have angst, you have even feelings of responsibility and of course the desire for virtue signaling. You don't want your allies to see you, folding before these people, right? There's a certain social credibility and giving them the what for, and you're getting the thumbs up from your friends, right? We all like that. So there's tribal motivations, there's personal motivations in this. And it is. And I'll tell you, the thing for me that always, when I'm in the quote unquote right headspace, right? The rational one, the non-elephant one, you're not getting served up the dopamine. And I think that's why it feels like it's almost like it's counterintuitive. It literally feels like this is the right thing to do because your brain's rewarding you when you do it. But it's like the kid who eats too much Halloween candy, right? It's like, yeah, it's rewarding because it tastes great, but you're going to feel like shit tomorrow, right? That's exactly what we're talking about.
I still want that Snickers bar.
I know, right? And yet you still want it.
You planted that like how long ago?
Yeah,
and it's still there.
I know. It's like that. That's that reward center, right? We are our own worst enemy sometimes when it comes to that. And that's again why I'll return back to that word discipline when it comes to critical thinking, because it's that discipline, right? It's like you got to impose it on yourself sometimes.
The that part of the brain, the amygdala, that is activated by these threats, whether they're physical threats or threats to our beliefs, it activates what's called the 4 Fs. Fight, flight, freeze, or mating. Okay,
that's new.
So I'm gonna substitute
I had
the mating.
fawn before.
Okay.
As the 4 Fs.
The 4? What was the fourth one?
Fawn, Fawn.
Okay.
You said mating. I always had
said,
fawn there.
Well,
maybe it's the same thing.
I'm gonna.
I don't know.
Substitute your own reasoning.
I'm totally just interrupting you here. Please.
No, it's totally fine. But yeah, that's the part that's. I need a rush. There's a rush. It's flooding the brain with dopamine, with chemicals that. It takes over the part of our brain that can think more rationally about it.
Yeah.
And where's the dopamine in critical thinking?
Exactly. Right? Exactly. The only way that I've found to be able to deal with this in a long-term situation that's worked for me, that I wanted to throw out there for people, is that changing the elephant, and I think Kahneman goes into this, maybe not, I'm not sure, but it's a slower process. If you want to effect change in your elephant, your emotional base, the biases, the filters, all the stuff that happens that you're not really totally in charge of. Let's put it that way, right? And yeah, I think you all know kind of what I'm talking about. Impulses, instincts, immediate reactions to things. If you want to change those things, and you can, it's a slower process. It's going to take more time, right? I've found one of the ways to make that work for me has been to change my writer's priorities in life. And by doing that, it's affected a change in the lower levels. In other words, is social media credibility important to me? It used to be a lot more important to me than it is now. That's a change I made. I just decided this needs to not be as important to me. Because this is, and I'll tell you why, for me personally, it's because it's an area that I am sensitive to and I don't do well in. I react when people criticize me harshly in ways that I don't like to react. And I find that there are times when I have tried to exert discipline and exert critical thinking and, okay, I'm gonna be better about this. And yet, right, turns out, I'm maybe not, but maybe because of an ADHD thing, maybe I have a higher sensitivity to rejection and criticism. I don't know why that particular piece of information made such a difference to me, but it did, learning that. Because what it did is it caused me to realize that rather than continuing to throw myself into a fight that is going to trigger me every time I get into it, maybe I need to change my priorities, which is something the writer can do, so that this isn't as important to me anymore. And because I made that change, and it took a while, I had to remind myself of it over and over again for a period. When I receive harsh criticism online, it doesn't hit me as hard. And I don't know what I changed except that decision and subsequent reinforcement of that decision to do that. But I think it's sort of flipping the script on our triggers.
Yeah.
Okay, I have this trigger. I can try to armor up and just exposure therapy myself into some delusional state where I'll be able to stand up to any criticism, no matter how harsh, from people. Yeah, I've been doing this for 10 years and I never reached that state. And I thought, maybe it's me. Maybe it's not all of them, you know? And maybe I need to change how I'm approaching this. And I'm only throwing this out there because it's given me a little tiny bit more room for emotional growth and awareness, for self-awareness, right? Of how to deal with that. I'm only throwing it out as a general idea of, it's not avoidance, it's recognition of our limitations. And I think there's a difference. What do you think?
I think I'm still struggling to deal with the kinds of criticism that I face on social media.
Yeah. Oh, don't think I have it all down. I'm just saying it's easier now. It's not like, it's just easier.
I'm at one of those places. Maybe it's where you're currently asking me, in that a bit of a recency bias combined with how emotional these things are.
Yeah, fair enough.
People can be really cruel online.
Yeah.
And I take a lot of misogynistic abuse, and it's like, why do we need to do this? Like, can't you just not be a jerk?
Right.
One of the things that really tends to trigger me, I think, more than anything online, is when people comment without having read or watched the content I produced. Because I think, I've been working on this for years. My field of expertise is pretty narrow, but within that, I kind of know what I'm talking about. I could be wrong, and I will fully admit that. But when I've spent this much time thinking about and hearing what other experts say and trying to craft a message in the most, not just engaging, but palatable way possible, because I really try hard not to trigger other people. I want them to learn. And when people are triggered, they can't learn. So when I spend all of that time doing that, and somebody's comes in and their elephant clearly just looks at the headline or reads a couple things or watches the first 5 seconds and jumps to a conclusion and then decides to attack me on it.
Yep.
It's really hard for my elephant and my rider to go, wait a minute, be nice about this, or even how to handle that. So
totally hear you on that. Totally hear you on that. Well, this is actually might be a great time to segue to the other thing I wanted to bring up about critical thinking, because we talked about emotions, and I have, I go on and on and on about this. I talk about emotional needs, emotional reactions. I've done whole videos about Scientology's bullshit on emotions. I mean, this is stuff that I really get into. Lisa Feldman Barrett's book on emotions is amazing. There's great stuff in neuroscience and psychology about emotions. So there's a lot there, and it's something you all should check out. But there's another aspect, and we were talking about this briefly as well off mic, and that is what your commenter was so clearly not demonstrating, and what so many human beings have such horrible times with, and that is humility. It's right on your shirt.
it is. So
Right.
it's
Be curious, be skeptical, be humble, it says. And that third one seems to be a bugbear, even amongst educators, and even in the skeptic community, and even amongst the most rational, self-aware people that we know. We still run into this problem of this separate component. And I think this is a learned skill more so than a character trait. Personally, I think it's something you have to learn, because I sure as hell did. I walked out of Scientology with an ego the size of this room, right? I mean, if you had known me back then, you would have thought I was a total fucking asshole. And I have my problems and issues these days, but not like I used to be. I mean, it was really stuck up, arrogance, nose in the air. I know better than anybody in this room. I'm the smartest guy in every room. And that's the cult member attitude, unfortunately. They kind of, they breed it into you. So I believe that this might be another component that you might be encountering some difficulty with.
Yeah. Others overconfidence in what they think they know. Back to Daniel Kahneman, he was asked once if he had a magic wand that would rid the world of anything, what would it be? And he said overconfidence.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. When you're overconfident, you can't learn, right? So humility, intellectual humility, is recognizing the limits of what you know, of recognizing that you could be wrong, recognizing that others might know things that you don't know, being willing to change your mind with evidence. And there is, when people, a little bit of knowledge turns out to be a dangerous thing sometimes. And when we get a little bit, and when I say all this, I want to clarify, I'm not necessarily talking about a person. Some people can, of course, be overconfident in general. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes what happens is we are overconfident in almost every area of our lives, except for that in which we have deep knowledge. Because it's in those areas we realize, well, actually, there's a lot to know here. And I don't know this all, but it's a steep learning curve to get there. And in the meantime, there's all of these other areas where we don't know that much, that we don't even know what there is to know. And so we assume we know more than we do. Mm-hmm. And then, especially if it's something that's emotional for us, or if it's tied to our identity or something, and we get into a conversation with somebody who disagrees with us, then that elephant again is rampaging because of those overconfidence and it's a serious problem. The best thing that, when I teach critical thinking, this is the shirt that I use, be curious, be skeptical, be humble. Be curious. Want to know things. Actively search for information, especially if it runs counter what you already believe.
Yep.
Be skeptical. This doesn't just mean of what other people tell you. Be skeptical of what you believe.
That's right.
And be humble. Recognize, be teachable, right? Recognize that you don't know everything. There's often, I find, and this is anecdotal, admittedly, but those who consider themselves, who openly wear the badge of critical thinker, or a skeptic, or whatever it is, it is this is who I am. My identity, what I'm putting out there to the world, is how smart I am and how good of a critical thinker I am.
Yep.
Tends to have the biggest issue in the humility part. And interestingly, they will tell me that. They will look at my shirt and they will say, oh, that's great. But you lost me on humility, because they're really sure they're right. Because They're critical thinkers and they got there using evidence and their beautiful logic, right?
That's right. Well, what you have there, of course, are emotional needs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, the need to be right.
That's right. And it's a powerful one.
It is.
It's a powerful one. In fact, I mentioned in conversation that I am aware of, I believe, most cults. I won't say every one, but when it comes to cults, and cults are explanatory in many ways. Cult leaders are offering all kinds of explanations to the world, to their followers, about the world and about themselves, right? That's why people hook up with these things. And at the end of the day, that's a pretty broad statement, but it's workable, right? And one of those explanations in cult after cult after cult after cult is the mechanism, quote unquote, of being right. We're going to explain how, sorry, just visually, my screensaver came on there. There's some mechanism that they will explain within their dogma or within their belief set to explain why people need to be right. And the funny thing is, they'll usually explain this mechanism in such a way that there's a means of overcoming it, because it's a control mechanism, right? If somebody starts disagreeing with the cult leader, oh, you're just trying to be right. You're not actually hearing what I'm saying. You're not listening. You're not getting. You're just asserting your rightness. And you need to knock that off, right? And that is a fill in the blank for whatever name they give to that mental, spiritual deficiency or process that you have to be right. And your need to be right is overcoming or overwhelming the fact that I'm trying to teach you something right now as the cult leader and you're not listening, you're not getting it because of your incessant compulsive need to be right. And in Scientology, this is called a service facsimile. And there's a term for it, and it's a concept of a thing that exists in your mind, and there's a process to deal with it and get rid of it. So you're not compulsively having to be right. And this produces all kinds of emotional and cognitive activity in people when you start giving them this information. And
This is like gaslighting 101.
oh, absolutely,
Holy
it is. Oh, yeah.
beans.
This is full on. These are control mechanisms.
Okay.
I'm not saying these are things that are good. I'm saying that it's such a powerful part of our personality that cult leaders often have to come up with a specific explanation for this ego thing that we do of having to be right. Now, obviously, it makes all kinds of evolutionary sense for us to have a certainty in the things that we know. Otherwise, we'd be sitting around in the savannah questioning everything all the time, and we would never eat or get anything done, right? Assumptions have to be made in a world where you don't understand what the hell's going on around you. And for most of our existence, we have not understood what's going on around us.
But we thought we did.
So we came up with some explanation. Here's the cycle as I see it is observe something weird, clouds in the sky, storm, right? Lightning. Come up with an explanation for it. Beat everybody else into submission to accept that explanation. And if they don't, well, you're just being right. Right? But we have to have some explanation earlier than that, right? We have to have some explanation. And as long as we've got something, well, that beats nothing.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned in your talk, we have a real problem with having nothing as the answer.
We don't like not knowing.
No. I don't know is the 3 hardest words in critical thinking to say, right? I was wrong or I don't know. Take your pick. Either one. Hardest thing for us to say, those 3 words, right?
Yeah, for sure. Are you familiar with B.F. Skinner's work?
I am. Conditioning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
not a fan, but some of his conclusions
what do you mean,
worked out.
The conditioning?
Conditioning, the psychological principle.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if that's
that was B.F. Skinner's work.
No, I know, but it is. I guess I'm wondering if what I'm talking about is the same. I don't think it is.
I'm sorry.
No, it's totally fine.
That's what I know him for. Please tell me what you were thinking of.
Well, his work with on superstitions.
Oh, tell me.
It is related to the conditioning, but so I'm going to combine a couple of people's work here, Shermer's work and Skinner's work. So Michael Shermer proposed the concepts of patternicity and agenticity. So the idea where we really want to understand the world around us. Like imagine yourself without all of modern knowledge being out on the savannah with your small tribe, and you are trying to understand, is that a predator that I hear in the rustle? And so that's a pattern, right? You've sensed I hear a pattern. Now, is the pattern the wind or is it a predator? If it's the wind, but you think it's a predator, you're alive.
Right.
You're paranoid, but you're alive.
Yep.
But if it's a predator and you think it's the wind, you're dead.
Yep.
So his idea was that not only is pattern recognition selected for, but also agenticity. The assuming that there was an agent behind, a knowing force behind the pattern that we perceived.
Yeah.
And we are the descendants of those who saw patterns in things where there weren't patterns, because that was better than not seeing real patterns.
There it is.
And then also the agenticity, assuming that the storm had an angry God behind it or something, that there is a force behind something. And so he even says that we're natural born supernaturalists. So B.F. Skinner did some really interesting work with, he started with pigeons on the, what he did was he would randomly give pigeons food, and the pigeons would, in their trying to figure out if what they were doing, trying to figure out if there was a pattern behind the food, started to exhibit behaviors. Like if I turn this direction and then like squat and then do then I got food. But if I did something else, then I didn't get food. So what they started to do was develop a superstitious pattern of behavior where they were trying to sort the pattern out. Is there something that is behind the pattern of that I'm doing that's resulting in the pattern of me getting food? Because if so, that means that not only is the pattern real, but I can control the pattern.
And that is my basic understanding of the evolution of religion.
Right. Because if I do whatever this is, this ritual, then I can control. Yeah. So it helps us to feel a sense of control. It's called an illusion of control. And randomness.
This is so key to so much of our beliefs and basis of so much of our society.
And the thing is, the randomness is what's real.
Exactly.
But randomness is really hard to accept. The fact that random shit just happens,
that's right,
or that I don't have any control over the random bad shit that happens, those are hard pills to swallow.
That's right.
So what's easier to swallow is there's a force behind the bad events that are happening or the good events, and then I have some sort of control in the outcome.
That's right. Even the old Far Side or the old, my knee is hurting, a storm's coming.
Oh, I haven't seen that. I love the Far Side, but I haven't seen that one.
Well, that old wives' tale though about storms coming, my ears are popping, or storms coming, my limbs are aching, or something. Like people will use these things that are absolutely positively not, credible signals or predictors, but because of experience, it hurt a couple times and then a storm happened, so clearly my old leg is a legitimate predictor for the storms coming, right? People develop these little heuristics all throughout their life, these measurable ways of trying to predict the world. And just because we come up with it and we're enamored with it doesn't mean we're right. Mm-hmm. But because we came up with it, we're invested in it. It's our little creation. We're going to fight for it. We're going to defend it. We're going to believe the world is this way.
Well, that's a really great example because a lot of people believe that their arthritis acts up when there's a weather change.
Right.
That has been tested, and it is not a thing. But
I felt it.
Right.
But I felt it.
So that's when good old confirmation bias kicks in.
Right.
I believe this. And so in my brain, what I remember is those times that I felt it and the weather changed, but I don't remember when I felt it and the weather didn't change.
Exactly.
Or when I felt it, let me say this again, or when I didn't feel it and the weather changed. All of those events we don't remember. What we remember are those times that confirms that those beliefs. And then that overconfidence again kicks in. And what I find so fascinating again is those are great examples of how our personal experiences can lead us astray. And yet how vested people get in those beliefs. And when we study those things using the process of science, trying to blind them, trying to use larger sample sizes, trying to actually understand, is this pattern real?
Yep.
And the pattern's not real.
Yep.
People won't believe that because they're so vested in. Another great example that every time I communicate about it, oh my goodness, people feel so strongly about it, is the full moon. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, full moon and crime. There's actually not a correlation. Or full moon and hospital admissions. There's not a correlation. Full moon and kids acting out. There's not a correlation. Now, there are slight correlations between some things that are nominally related to there being more light at various times. But those are very small and only seen in like circadian rhythms, only seen in areas without lots of light pollution. But again, like all of that, these are things that people believe and their experiences tell them otherwise. And their experiences are fueled by their emotions and their biases and their worldviews and then confirmation bias and so on. And so with I'm rambling at this point, but part of my communication, what I'm trying to do is get people to understand that, I have to quote again. Richard Feynman famously said, the first principle is you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool.
And that's where the humility has to come in, because all the things you just said, here's the thing about this, the punchline to all of this is that everything we're talking about the bugs in the system. The features are that all of these mechanisms evolved for a reason to aid our survival. We try to frame it that way so that it's clear that we're not a bunch of mutants running around like zombies doing stupid, insane stuff. This is how we evolve to think. It's kept us alive. That doesn't mean it's objectively true. And there's a huge, huge misunderstanding between the concepts of truth and rightness and just bare bones survival out there. If you're surviving, you're right, but you can survive on a bed of lies. You can survive on pure nonsense. As long as you're surviving, your brain's giving you the 51% all good. We're all good here. At least 51% of what we're doing is A-okay because we're still breathing. So you can't necessarily use these we're a little off in how we judge ourselves, I guess is what I'm saying. And the reason I bring this up is because of this humility factor. I'm still on this, right? This is where humility can come from if we're willing to acknowledge that we ain't all that in a plate of biscuits. We're not that wonderful thinkers. We kind of suck at it, but we're better at it than everybody else on this planet. So, so we have a skill set that allows us to think futures, to think into the future farther than any other creature on this planet can, and therefore plan accordingly. And because we have that ability, it gives us a real leg up. But that doesn't mean that we get the details right all the time. We screw them up constantly. And we end up, studying this stuff because we want people to think better. And it seems like these two things... when I first got into this and was first learning about all this, it seemed so obvious. Well, we teach everybody all the logical fallacies. Yeah. We teach everybody all the cognitive biases, and you're good. What's the problem, right? But as you and I have come to learn, right, we have these egos and these emotional centers, and they're fragile. And they mess with us.
I love this because what we do is that we don't use these to find the truth. We use them as weapons against others who disagree with us.
Bingo. That's what I'm talking about. And the switch in the right or decision, like I mentioned earlier, I was able to do something that affected a positive change in my life by deciding that the priority of, comment sections wasn't as high as I had set it to be. I had arbitrarily decided this was important to me. And so I realized that was something I could change, because you're absolutely right. The precursor to that was realizing I can't control other people. No matter what words I use, or how eloquently I speak, or how wonderfully I do what I do, and I do it okay. But, I don't think eloquent fits here, but you know what I mean. No matter how I get it across, I ain't getting it to everybody. In fact, I'm not getting it to a majority. Yeah. Neither did Jesus. So I figure if he ain't doing it, maybe I should, bring myself down a few notches, right, in terms of what I'm going to accomplish. And that's humility. I bring all of this up because I think if we can change the same kind of thinking in terms of our need to be right, certainty, status.
I would love that. I would love that. I like to think of myself as a critical thinker in training, constantly learning. I am not right about everything. I was telling you earlier, I wish I knew what I was wrong about, because then I wouldn't be wrong. But by definition, I don't know what I'm wrong about.
We don't know what we don't know. I've been saying that lately.
I need other people to help me see that.
Yeah.
And I need to be open to them when I hear that, and I need to change my mind. And I need to be willing to say, I was wrong and I changed my mind. That said, so we need to be humble, but we need to allow others to have that too. Ego is a hard thing, right? Like, we want to protect our ego, but others do too. And if we establish, if we create the conditions, I say create the conditions. If we don't allow others to also change their minds, then it creates conditions where their egos are also more in control.
Yep.
Meaning, let somebody else change their mind without mocking them, without telling them we're stupid, without saying, I told you so. Look, I told you so can be really fun to say. I'm totally get it. Or like Sheldon Cooper says on Big Bang Theory, I have informed you thusly, right? Like, because there's so many ways I can say this. Look, I was right. You were wrong. Will you finally admit it? That's not productive.
Correct. It's almost never helpful.
It's not.
It's not. And I learned that hard in the cult world. Because the very, very last thing, and we all get this when we apply it in to somebody else, right? We can get this. So let's do that for a second and go, okay. When somebody comes out of a cult, I think we all pretty much get why it's a really, really championship level bad idea to immediately start tearing into them about what idiots they were all those years they were in a cult.
For sure.
Right? You fucking moron. We've been waiting years for you to finally wake up. Jesus, it's about goddamn time. You know, you were so stupid all those years. You say crap like this to somebody who just gets out of a cult, you're going to send them right back into it. This is just the height of stupidity to talk to somebody like this who has just come out of an abusive situation, a coercive situation, a gang, a cult, whatever, right? Bad job situation. They don't need the judgment. It doesn't help them in any way. It's nothing but your ego on display. So we can see that pretty clearly. I don't get a lot of pushback on that. No, I don't get a lot of pushback on that. In the cult world, people get that because you're talking to damaged, traumatized people, right? Yeah. The last thing they need to hear is how wrong they are. That same attitude is exactly the kind of change I'm talking about making in our heads when it comes to dealing with other people. Is I'm going to make it a point that lording my rightness over people or lording how wrong they were over them is not just a bad idea. It's a counterproductive idea that's going to move things backwards. And if you can really get that, let it sink in, you'll never do that to somebody again. That would be ideal, right? Is that people don't do that. If
I am putting myself in the side of someone who would potentially want to admit I was wrong, even the thought that might be coming at me would be enough to keep me from admitting it.
And that's what keeps people in cults, in bad relationships, in bad jobs, bad situations.
Be the place where someone feels safe to say, I'm not sure about this.
Exactly.
What do you think?
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Exactly. And that's why maintaining a friendship or some lines of communication with your friends or family who are in a cult or in a bad situation is such a good idea, because you maintain a line where they can eventually come back to you and say, I'm having issues or problems. And if you cut that off, if you're the one cutting that off, not the cult member, if you're doing that to them, that's your bad. You shouldn't be doing that to people who get into those situations. Obviously, context is king, and there are exceptions to everything. But as a general rule, you want to stay their friend.
Yeah.
You want to stay in touch with them because you're their lifeline at this point, and they don't see it, but maybe you do, right?
Yeah.
So
I suppose it depends on what your goals are. If your goals are to rub it in, then I suppose stay on that path. But if your goal is to save somebody.
Exactly. If you want to accomplish that goal, there is only one way to do it, and it is the humble route. It is not the I told you so route. Consider this. A lot of people in the atheist world, have you observed, I've observed this, have you observed a lot of people in this world had bad experiences in religion, had bad experiences with faith?
Yeah. My sampling suggests yes.
Yeah, mine too, right? A lot of people. Same in the ex-cult world. I mean, most people are ex-cult members, right? And so they're there because they had this really bad experience with this thing. And that can linger and that can stay. And if not treated or educated for, the person doesn't ever change. And there's a very interesting thing that can be created in somebody or manipulated in somebody or exaggerated in somebody in a religion or extremist group or hardcore belief group, like a cult or a fundamentalist group. We're right and everybody else is wrong. Mm-hmm. Now you leave the group, you leave the beliefs behind, but the attitude sticks.
I mean, humans have a need to have a tribe.
Yeah.
And to have a tribe, there has to be, if there's an us, there's a them.
Exactly.
And I suppose the tribe may change, but the tribalism doesn't.
Exactly. And that certainty, that us versus them, it's a habit. It becomes a habit independent of the beliefs.
Yeah, it's not, I don't want to say if it's a habit. It is part of the wiring.
Same.
Yeah,
we're saying the same thing. Exactly.
We have to be aware of it and counter it.
That's right. And if somebody doesn't even know that this is part of the package of being in a fundy group or being in a cult, and most people don't realize this, they think getting out means they abandon the beliefs. And that's it. They're done. No, they're not. That's the easy part. Getting rid of the belief set is the easy part because you abandon it right away for the most part. Maybe some things linger and it takes you a few years to dig in and dig up some of the deeper stuff. Certainly the stuff connected with identity. But it's easy to come out of religion and go, there is no God. But still maintain the us versus them attitude of I'm infinitely right.
Yeah.
Simply because I think it.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own trauma from religion as well. And there was certainly a part of the reason that I left was because of. So I was raised in a young earth creationist church. And so this was rural Western Iowa. When I say rural, I graduated with 39 and that was half my county. I learned how to drive on a tractor in a cornfield. To this day, I can drive a stick. I cannot parallel park. I will drive around the block until I find something. So let's just say I was from a very rural area where religion was very important and it was part of the community. My church taught that God made man in his image and then made woman out of him to serve him, and that her sin and temptation of him was the cause of everything that was bad in the world.
I hate that whole
and
thing.
At one point, the youth minister came to my house to tell me what my place was, and I was so confused because my mother was a very strong woman who kept telling me, Melanie, you can do anything. This is my mother. I'm quoting. You can do anything anybody with a penis can do, except for pee standing up. My mom doesn't have a Southern accent. I don't know why I did that. But I'm like, Mom, I don't understand. You're telling me not to be dependent on a man, but the entire church is telling me that I'm bad because of who I am. And when I left that, I was primed to leave because of how personal it was. But when I left, I was angry. And I was looking for another tribe. And this was before the widespread use of the internet. Apparently I'm old, but I know back in the olden days.
When we were riding dinosaurs to school, yeah.
But I didn't readily find another community. And I carried that anger for quite some time. I found authors. Those authors tended to have a lot of anger behind them as well. And then the certainty that I was right in this new belief took over. And the anger at the other tribe, my old tribe, for doing this to me. And so
this is the exact same thing ex-cult members go through, same cycle.
It was so confusing. And it was so traumatizing, I suppose, for lack of a better word. But I suppose my point is kind coming out of a situation like that, I basically, by definition, I changed tribes. And I left the tribe for a reason. And so I had a lot of anger towards that other tribe. And I wanted them to be wrong. I wanted to be right. And especially wanted them to be wrong about the things that had caused me so much harm.
Right. That's right.
And so, it was taking me a long time to move past that. I sense that that anger and that sense of certainty and that sense of othering in others in the atheist community. And I get it.
Yep.
I totally understand.
Yep. Me too.
but-
I went through the same curve. I didn't come out and be like, I was like, fuck God, fuck organized religion, screw all this stuff. It's evil. It must be destroyed.
Yeah.
Oh, it's straight over. It's that pendulum swing, right?
So
you go
like-
from this end over to the other end.
Right. So me today, it looks back at that and early me and then later me and still goes, oh man, I don't know if I could have talked to either one of them and been productive, but also I had to go through that to get to where I am.
Exactly.
But hopefully then also, and I don't know what future me would say to current me. So now I'm in like some weird time loop. Like when do we reach peak wisdom? And I have all the answers now.
oh, I don't know about that part.
Today me does not have any of that, right? But I suppose at this point in my journey, I'm just trying to speak to other people where I was, and hopefully trying to listen to people who are ahead of me, who have that kind of wisdom that maybe can move me along. I see what you're saying. The certainty, the tribalism, the emotions, all of those things are driving our reasoning through a lot of that process.
Yeah, big time.
And
Big time.
I don't know how to help people who are in various parts of that because I don't know what have helped me.
It's actually not any different than the same answers we've already been providing. It's compassion, it's care, it's understanding, it's a listening ear. It's dealing with the person in front of you. Because everybody's got their own thing. And they're in their place. And the path is going to even be slightly different for everybody, which is why I don't think there's a 12-step program out of this. I think you have to find your own path, right? You have to find your own wisdom. We here offer some tips from the road, some guidelines, some like notes. Well, here's what I encountered when I went down that path. Didn't seem so helpful. You know, here's this other road. Seems like more of a main road that I've been on for a while. Seems like it's going in the right direction. That's kind of what this podcast is about today, is like, well, there's some roads you can go down, right? And if you think the end of the road is total certainty and you got it all taped and you got it all figured out, as far as I'm concerned, at this point in my life, that's a false goal. That's a fake goal. That's a cult goal. There is no peak. There is no, I got it all figured out. That's a false idea of what life is even about. You know, it's not about that. It's the journey. It's not the destination.
It would be nice,
you
though.
know? Well,
I
it
would love to have it all figured out.
Oh my God, right? Wouldn't it be awesome?
But I suppose the moment I think I have it all figured out is probably the moment I'm full of shit. Because
Basically, every single time I've thought that I got there, I've been humbled.
yes,
And not by myself realizing or learning, oh yeah, no, I got more. I got a lot more. You get educated, you go get a degree, you go learn some things at like a real deep level. What's the inevitable product of that? I think if you got your head on straight, the inevitable product is exactly what you said earlier. Holy shit, look at all the stuff I don't know. It humbles you. It puts you in your place. And human beings are not all that like I said, in a plate of biscuits, right? We're just not. We're not designed to be. And so we can't be. When this really hit me hardest?
Okay.
Was when I gave up the goal of immortality.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah. Because for most of my life, I was inculcated as a child that I was an immortal spiritual being. I was going to live forever. This awareness that I have was going to carry on past my body, and when it died, and I'd go get another body and another one, and I would carry on. But even if I didn't have a body, my life essence, me, the personality that is me, would continue to live forever. And I would watch movies like Highlander. Love them, right? Immortals, right? There can be only one. And I would contemplate and think about eternity and immortality in very deep ways. This was a returning theme in my life as a Scientologist. All the way up until I watched The Good Place.
Whoa, really?
Yep.
Why?
Because it was the very first time that anyone realistically sort of sat me down while I'm watching the show and invited me to really think about what eternity would look like as a human being.
Holy crap.
Like, here it is. You're in heaven. It's forever. You get whatever you want forever. You're a human being. You have five, you get your perceptions, and that's it. That's what you got. That's how you consume the universe. You don't get to go be the universe or spiritually or something. This is your experience. And you realize there's a limit. There's a point where you're done. And Chidi in the show reached that point. And once that happened, I went, oh my God, right. You don't just rinse, repeat forever. It would be eternity itself. Not dying would itself become a kind of torture. Because you'd have to keep living. Yet you've experienced 100 times over after what, 5,000 years, 10,000 years? I mean, however long it's going to take you to satiate yourself on life, it's going to happen. There's going to come a point where you've done everything there is to do. You've read every book there is to read. You've had every experience. As an immortal being, you'll never pull that off in a human lifetime. But in 10,000 years, 20,000 years, you could do it all. Travel to the farthest ends of wherever you want to go, figure out quantum time travel, do all that too. You're still going to have a limit, and you're done. And at that point, existence, living, becomes torture. And once that was clear to me, and it's very clearly shown in the show, it's not like they mince words about it. The whole concept, I realized exactly what I just said. It's a false goal. It's a, wouldn't that be great? Yeah, as long as you don't think about it too much. And once that hit me, I lost the entire lifetime concept goal of, wouldn't immortality be the most amazing, wonderful carrot to ever chase? Because Scientologists chase that carrot and they pay millions and millions of dollars for it.
Wow, that is heavy.
Isn't it?
That's just wowzers.
Yeah, it hit me hard.
I mean, I can see how, and I've heard people articulate that in essence, they want heaven to be real. They want immortality to be real. And that is why they hold certain religious beliefs.
Yep.
And back to the elephant, that is a very powerful motivator.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
But so going through the process of thinking that through, though, and going, what does that actually look like? Is that going to motivate this anymore? That's just a wow.
Yeah, that's the kind of self-examination that I think is necessary for people who come out of religion or come out of a cult belief set. Is you got to drill all the way down to the basics of what you believed. What were the pillars on which your whole life rested? If you don't do that, you're not undoing the cult's influence. Because that's it drills all the way down to your identity, to the bottom of your soul. You got to dig that stuff up. It takes time. It takes, education. I don't know that it has to take therapy. It helps. But it's a process. And I think you're not done till you get down to that, because how can you call yourself free of the cult or free of the religion if you're still ruled by its very basic goals, which are false goals?
So, I mean, I didn't go through all of that. I don't actually ever remember being in a place where immortality or living forever in various forms was a goal. Even that wasn't something.
Different strokes for different folks. For us, it was.
Yeah.
It's central theme to Scientology.
For me, I will say that like we talked earlier about certainty being so enticing.
Yeah.
It feels good to be certain. It feels good to know. It feels good to pad the ego, to not have doubts about things. For me, I realized, I don't know what that process was, but now current me looks at the I don't know or realizing how insignificant I am as actually being a bit empowering.
Me too. And that was the script flip I had to do on myself. That it was okay to not be infinite, godlike, immortal, powerful, spiritual being. Like, that ain't me.
Yeah, because what matters is this life. It's what I leave behind me. It's the ways that I try to make the world a better place and live this life in a more productive way. Not because I think something else is coming, but because of what it is. I guess is what it is for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's actually there's quite a bit of empowerment in it because it allows you to take control of your life as it is and realize this is what I've got. And I want to do with it the best thing that I can.
Exactly. And I don't know how that's a bad thing. If that's where you get to, awesome. You know? And it doesn't require, and let me just say this in case anybody's listening to this and thinking, you know, oh, they're all down on God and all this. No, I'm really not. I don't care if you believe in God. It's okay. In fact, it can be a big part of your life. But when you're using it as a cudgel or a weapon, that's when we, you know, have things to say about it.
Yeah, to me, again, it's just about awareness.
That's right.
It's about recognizing that belief for what it is, how it might impact your other beliefs, how it might impact your reasoning, and knowing what that belief is doing for you.
Exactly. And to you. And is somebody else doing things to you with that belief? Ugh. Compromising your integrity, forcing you to do things you know you shouldn't be doing, or forcing others to do things you feel uncomfortable about. That's when you need to find out what's going on here. Having a belief is harmless. It's an idea. It's what you do with it that matters. And that's where, you know, the whole fight against cults comes in. So, all right, we've been talking for a while.
I know. I could talk with you forever, apparently.
Fun, isn't it?
It really is. Maybe next time again. I don't know. It's great to see you in person, but wow.
Well, if I have to do this some more.
Apparently. Thank you so much for your time. I learn so much from you every time I talk to you.
Well, vice versa. I mean, you're an educator and I get educated. So where do people find you?
So my website is thinkingispower.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm really trying on YouTube. So if you went over to my YouTube channel and subscribed or liked some of my videos, I would greatly appreciate that.
Do so. You will not be sad. You will be happy. Okay? She's awesome. Her materials are amazing. Simple, easy to understand, gets to the point. Good critical thinking. I can't recommend Melanie enough. Okay. So thinkingispower.com. Links below. I will link to everything in the podcast here. All right, folks. See you next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.